Recently, a company called Eon Systems took every neuron in an adult fly's brain, all 125,000 of them that are bound together by 50 million synaptic connections. They copied the whole thing from electron microscopy data, gave that copied brain a virtual body, and pressed start. The fly moved, it stretched its legs, it rubbed its front feet together, it drank from a bowl. Not because anyone programmed those behaviors, because the brain, the copied brain, generated them on its own. Now here's what nobody is connecting. Buried inside millions of government-released files from the Jeffrey Epstein case is a single email from EFTA 018643882 that contains two ideas. Idea 1. Build a mind reader using new understandings of the brain. Idea 2. Tissue regeneration, in parentheses, cloning. A device that reads a mind, linked in the same document to a process that clones a human body. Everyone asks the same question about Jeffrey Epstein. Did he kill himself, or was he killed? But what if that's the wrong question entirely? What if a man who spent millions funding consciousness research, brain mapping, cryonics, and cloning believed he had a third option? I'm your host, Magnum, and this is the Swerve Podcast. What is up, everybody? How are you all doing today? I hope you're having a really wicked, awesome time. I'm excited you've chosen to join me for another crazy episode. You could have been anywhere in the world, but yet here we are learning about the craziest things I can possibly find. Today, we are going deep on one of the most disturbing conspiracy theories to come out of the Epstein Files. The idea that Jeffrey Epstein was building a pipeline for consciousness transfer. A system to move a human mind from one body to another, or potentially a robotic body. Who knows? We're going all over the place with this one. This is going to be a very interesting episode. We're going to attempt to address questions like, why was a brain scanning rig installed in the Manhattan townhouse where Epstein was trafficking minors? How did a convicted sex offender end up with his own cells stored in liquid nitrogen inside Harvard's most advanced genetics lab? Why did Epstein keep funding psychic research for years after admitting he'd seen, quote, no one with special abilities, not one, end quote? And if this technology was a pure fantasy in 2016, why did a fly's brain just wake up inside a virtual body in 2026? Now, if you're a first-time listener and you're wondering what you've stumbled across, welcome to the Swerve Podcast. If you enjoy deep dives on obscure topics, conspiracy theories, and the mysterious, you're in the right place because this is all that I cover here. Every week, I obsess over one fringe topic, researching everything from peer-reviewed papers to unhinged 3 a.m. YouTube robot voice videos. I'll show you what I found, I'll explain the technical stuff, and I'll go deeper than you thought, but I'll trust you to decide what's real. Before we begin today's show, this episode does contain descriptions of abuse, trafficking, and harm to minors, so listener discretion is strongly advised. Everything discussed today is drawn from publicly available sources. However, the existence of a document in a federal release does not verify every claim within it. Many of the allegations we're going to be discussing, they remain unproven, unverified, or disputed. We're going to be mentioning a lot of names, but the thing is, no individual discussed in the episode has been criminally charged in connection with a consciousness transfer pipeline program that we're going to be building a case for throughout the episode so we can better understand this conspiracy theory. I would take this commentary as entertainment. This isn't a legal proceeding. Hold on to your horses. This is going to be a wild ride. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. As always, let's get into the basics of today's show. In January 2026, the Department of Justice released its latest tranche of Epstein Files, millions of documents from the federal exhibits. And buried in those files, researchers started finding something nobody expected. Not just evidence of trafficking, not just connections to the powerful. What appears to be evidence of a systematic, multi-year, multi-billion-dollar research program that laid end to end looks like a blueprint for transferring a human mind from one body to another. Some investigators online have proposed a 5-stage pipeline towards this end. This is the basic idea. Map the mind, model the brain, preserve it, build a new body, and then transfer. Now, I want to give credit to a creator on YouTube called Mind Unveiled. This was the first person that I came across that laid out this initial framework for this theory. There is a link to his work along with every other citation in the show notes as always, if you would like to do further deep diving. My goal with today's show is to first inform you of this pipeline framework here in the basics, and then we're going to build into questions the framework has never addressed. We're going to look at things like, what does the science actually say? Is there a philosophical problem that breaks the whole theory? And how much of this technology has actually come to life since Epstein was funding it? Now, this episode is going to blow your mind, especially the third section when we get fully into the science. When you link it to this pipeline we're going to go through, it's truly going to disturb you. But first, let's get through this consciousness transfer pipeline itself. Because if you haven't seen it, this alone is shocking. The goal here in the basics is to lay out the pipeline for you. Then we're going to dive further into this in the heart of today's show. Stage 1, mapping consciousness. Epstein funded a guy named Dr. Gino Yu at Hong Kong Polytechnic University, who built a 5-stage model for quantifying how conscious a person is. This is according to EFTA 026244641. And as a reference here, I will be referring to every EFTA that anything we're saying comes from, so you can look it up yourself. All of this will be in the show notes as well. Epstein was also in correspondence with another guy named Peter Fenwick. Peter Fenwick is a near-death experience researcher who had emailed Epstein to discuss, quote, cosmic consciousness, end quote, according to EFTA 024602676. Fenwick had also informed Epstein that he had completed a $441,100 grant application according to EFTA 024602676. Peter Fenwick literally spent his entire life investigating what happens to consciousness when the body dies with his near-death experience research. So why is Epstein so interested in what this guy has to say? Furthermore, this is also strange. Epstein was also in correspondence with Dr. Dean Radin. This guy has come up on the podcast many times. He's a parapsychologist that researches psychic abilities and precognition with the Institute of Noetic Science. These two, they had a 48-minute Skype call on the same day as an email chain about spoon-bending experiments, according to EFTA 016127993 and EFTA 024826440. So Epstein was clearly interested in supernatural abilities of the mind and consciousness. What are the limits of it? What happens when the body dies? What happens to consciousness? Do we have a model that we can quantify consciousness with through Dr. Gino Yu? Does the mind actually have telepathic abilities or extended functions that we're not aware of, according to Dr. Dean Radin? So what we can say, Epstein was interested in fringe understandings of consciousness. What was he doing with this? Is he trying to map consciousness, better understand what it is? And the question is, why? Well, some people think this is the first stage of the pipeline, mapping consciousness, understanding it. What is it? Is it something more than awareness? Stage 2, modeling the brain. Epstein was a primary funder of Joscha Bach. Joscha Bach is an AI researcher at MIT whose thesis is that consciousness is actually computation. He talks about how the brain is hardware and the mind is software. And software, as we all know, can be copied. This comes out in EFTA 023904222, EFTA 025379093, and EFTA 026648856. Now, Joscha Bach's theories are very important for this whole consciousness transfer conspiracy theory. Keep this in mind. It will be coming up later in the episode. And then we have Ed Bowden. He's an MIT neuroscientist who is the leader of the Synthetic Neurobiology Group and professor at the Departments of Biological Engineering and Brain Cognitive Sciences. Well, this fella, he attended a meeting arranged by Epstein that also included a guy named Whitfield Diffie, who is one of the inventors of public key cryptography, and Martin Nowak, an evolutionary mathematician. This is all according to EFTA 023759111. They all got together and discussed brain computation. Then Ed Bowden again, according to EFTA 023573994, this time on Epstein's private island alongside Sebastian Sung, the Princeton neuroscientist whose foundational argument is the following: you are your connectome. Now, this is a weird word. Keep this word in mind. The connectome. What the connectome is, it's referring to your identity being encoded in the wiring pattern of your neurons. So why do we call it connectome? You know, there's things like a genome, that's all of your genetics in one. There's things like the proteome, that's all your proteins in one. So the connectome is all your connections in one. That's where the word comes from. But keep the connectome in mind. This is going to be important. So in addition to his interest in fringe consciousness studies, Epstein was trying to understand how the brain could be digitized or modeled. Stage 3, preservation. Epstein sent Joscha Bach, remember this guy, the AI researcher from MIT? He sent him to a company called Connectome, according to EFTA 024-70197. Now, what's Connectome? Well, Connectome is working on technology to chemically preserve the brain so that every neural connection becomes fixed in place permanently. The idea here is that someday someone could scan this preserved brain because all the connections are chemically preserved and use that data to extract and complete a wiring diagram of who they were. In other words, complete a connectome for someone. And in the same way, when I open this episode with a fly's connectome being modeled in a virtual body, maybe you could do that at some point. So this is what Connectome's doing. It's preserving the body. He's sending Joscha Bach out there to check out this company. Now, Epstein was also interested in whether or not Marvin Minsky, who is the father of artificial intelligence, he was interested if he had been preserved by a cryonics company called Alcor, according to EFTA 024544349. Now, here's a note I want to add to all of this. Epstein reportedly told people he wanted his head and reproductive organs frozen. So in addition to trying to understand these fringe capabilities of consciousness, in addition to trying to model and map the mind digitally and understand it as a computational system, he was also interested in preserving it. Now, stage 4, building a body. This is out of control. But George Church, a Harvard geneticist and one of the founding figures of modern genomics, huge synthetic biology guy, he replied to Epstein's direct question about cloning in November 2011 in EFTA 018-50962. This is what he said.
Yes, I'm working toward this goal fairly rapidly, but trying to do so in a way that minimizes risk to the field. My lab is good at conceiving of radically new technologies, as well as improving throughput and quality by factors of 10. Given a couple of years and decent funding, this would become much more reasonable.
By June 2013, Church personally arranged Epstein's skin biopsy at Massachusetts General Hospital as outlined in EFTA 00388-430. By August 2013, a doctor reported in EFTA 021-31791, with Church copied on the email, that Epstein's samples had produced, quote, several successful viable fibroblast cultures, end quote. These were stored in liquid nitrogen, scheduled for conversion into induced pluripotent stem cells, which are reprogrammed adult cells that sit at the foundation of modern cloning techniques. So the thesis for the conspiracy theory is that these correspondences point to Epstein being interested in the creation of a physical body. I guess we could say a vessel. Stage 5, the transfer. David Hansen of Hansen Robotics, he's the creator of the famous lifelike Sophia robot. Maybe some of you are familiar with this. Well, he had a direct Skype call with Epstein about building humanoid bodies according to EFTA 022299729. There's also a proposal outlined in EFTA 027258875 from the Genie Lab that included a line item for what it called, quote, sexy android bodies, end quote, with mind uploading at a $3 million price tag. That was what they thought this would cost. They had a 3-year goal of achieving a robot as smart as an adult narrowly, but generally as smart as a small child. That's what they were hoping for. This is outlined in those EFTAs. It's pretty wild, pretty out there. Here we go. So perhaps it's not only a physical biological body, if we're going with the conspiracy theory here, trying to be created, perhaps there's like android bodies that you could transfer the connectome into, or whatever the mind actually is. We don't know. But if it is the connectome and you can replicate that perfectly, well, maybe you could use that. Do you see where we're going with this? This is pretty wild. Now, Ben Goertzel is a pioneer in trying to construct artificial intelligence, and he recommends Randall Kuna to Epstein in EFTA 026799857. Now, Randall Kuna is described in the documents as the leading serious scientific proponent of mind uploading. He also runs Carbon Copies Foundation, which is dedicated to creating, quote, substrate-independent minds, end quote. The idea here being that a mind can run on any compatible platform. Interesting. Epstein's interested in that, being forwarded that. So Epstein's not only interested in all of these things we just went through, mapping consciousness, understanding fringe ideas of consciousness, modeling the brain, preserving the mind, molecular genetics that could eventually be used to clone human bodies. He's also interested in humanoid robots, artificial general intelligence, and uploading the mind. Now, if we go through each of these pieces of the pipeline one at a time, each of them could easily look like eccentric philanthropy. But when we lay them end to end and we go through it as a sequence, things start looking a little bit different. At least this is what the conspiracy theory claims. The idea here being measure awareness in stage 1, map the neural architecture in stage 2, freeze the blueprint in stage 3, build a vessel in stage 4, and then in stage 5, move the mind. And the rabbit hole goes much deeper than this. Let's get into the heart of today's show and swerve into the unknown. Everyone assumes Epstein funded consciousness research because he believed in it, but EFTA 025794443 tells a different story. After years of paying psychic researchers, brain scanners, and parapsychologists, Epstein admitted, quote, "I've seen no one with special abilities, not one," end quote. But he didn't shut the program down. He expanded it, which means the mystical research was never the point. Now, folks, I want to mention to you before we get into the deep dive here, this topic we're covering today won the March 2026 voting block. It received a lot of votes from all of you. So a reminder that you can sign up for free on Patreon if you want to help decide what topics are covered next. Go to patreon.com/The Swerve Podcast, press the blue join for free button. You create an account and an email with a password, and in only 1 to 2 minutes, you're going to be signed up and able to vote. How we do voting on the show, it's open on the 1st of each month and then closes on the 15th. So I always recommend it's best to hurry up and sign up now so that you don't miss the next voting block, or so that you can vote now if it's open while you're listening to this. Let's continue with today's deep dive. In the basics, I walked you through the pipeline, the what. Now I want to talk about the why, because Epstein wasn't just writing checks randomly. He was funding 2 competing theories of consciousness at the same time. And understanding those theories is the key to understanding the entire conspiracy. The first theory we're going to call the mystical fringe track. Here, the idea is that consciousness is a detectable force, something you can measure and score almost like a vital sign. Now, you already heard me mention the name Dr. Gino Yu and his 5-stage consciousness scale in the basics. But here's what I didn't tell you. Gino Yu wasn't just building a theoretical model. He was using it on real people and reporting the results directly to Epstein. Dr. Gino Yu is an associate professor at Hong Kong Polytechnic University whose research focuses on applying digital media technologies to cultivate creativity and what he calls enlightened consciousness. Now, Dr. Gino Yu wasn't just a researcher. He functioned as Epstein's primary recruiter for consciousness research, with what appears to have been a $100,000 retainer, according to EFTA 0258131. He was the guy who brought in Peter Fenwick, Dean Radin, and connections to Chinese parapsychology researchers. Now recall Peter Fenwick, he's the near-death experiences expert, and Dr. Dean Radin is the chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences and also a parapsychologist. He studies telepathy, precognition, things like that. Part of Yu's role appears to have been to find people studying things that mainstream science says doesn't exist. And EFTA 02446023 reveals that in November 2016, Yu wrote to Epstein the following.
I picked up a Vive setup that I hope to install at your place. I will also have a custom EEG rig setup as well.
The Vive setup was a virtual reality headset that fully immerses the person wearing it in a computer-generated environment, tracking their head and body movements in real time. EEG stands for electroencephalogram, a device that reads and records electrical activity in the brain by placing sensors on the scalp. It's used in medicine and research to monitor brain waves. I'm sure many of you are familiar with what I'm talking about. You've probably seen those electrodes placed on people's heads. This is being installed at Epstein's townhouse. So we have this brainwave reader being paired with a VR headset, and it's installed in a small room off the library of Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. The same property central to trafficking allegations. So let's put this another way. Epstein had a room where someone would strap on a headset and be in virtual reality while their brain activity was being monitored, and they were using it to evaluate people. In 2018, Dr. Gino Yu wrote about a specific woman named Natalie in EFTA 026244641. This is what he said to Epstein.
In my model, she is a stage 3.5 or so.
Here he's referring to that 5-stage consciousness model. But what is the significance of 3.5? Well, the gist of Dr. Gino Yu's model based on the EFTA is the following. Stage 1 is consensus reality. Stage 2 is all in one thing. Stage 3 is surrendering to the bigger forces at work. Stage 4 is intuition and insight. And stage 5 is special abilities. So what's happening here, Gino Yu is grading someone on a consciousness scale and then sending that score to a convicted sex offender. Now, here's a weird note. In that same email, this EFTA 026244641, Yu also goes on extensively about clitorises for more than half the email. I swear to God, look it up. The email discusses clitoracy, how the orgasmic gap between men and women needs to be fixed. Apparently, it included a 3D printout of an actual size clitoris and a ton of facts about the anatomy. This is part of what's in this email. He's forwarding something he copied from someone, and it's in the same email being sent. Like, what the f is going on, folks? When you spend weeks in the Epstein Files, the things you find are just out of control. Like, I am taking a huge break from Epstein file reading because it's too much. It's too crazy. In any case, Dr. Gino Yu, he also proposed a program called Polystery. This is according to EFTA 025677715. And this was aimed at 80 stage 3 people who have special gifts but cannot support themselves. So they're finding people that are higher up in this consciousness scale who have some kind of gift, but they are financially unwell. So basically 80 people in vulnerable states who are claimed to have unusual abilities, they're being funneled into some kind of program that's connected to Epstein. So the question is this research or is it a recruitment pipeline for the fragile? What kind of special abilities are we even talking about? And why was this relevant to the proposed research? In any case, you recall that I've mentioned Peter Fenwick. This is the near-death experience researcher and the cosmic consciousness guy. Well, according to EFTA 021922305, Epstein had proposed to him an idea about individuals being connected by something external. Epstein was curious why humans in solitary confinement go insane, and he was comparing it to how human cells in the body will die if they're disconnected from the whole. So if we are disconnected from our social human hierarchy, you could say. Why is it that bad things happen? These were questions he was wondering. Is there something external that is connecting us that we're disconnected from in isolation? And this correspondence indicates that Epstein did have unconventional ideas about consciousness. He was curious if we were all connected by some fundamental invisible force. Which brings us to Deepak Chopra. Deepak Chopra is a best-selling author and public figure known for promoting alternative medicine and theories linking consciousness, quantum physics, and human biology. Now, he was sending Epstein a lot of things. He's sending aura measurement apps, biofield science papers, VR meditation experiences, savant syndrome, and non-local minds. I reference you to look at EFTA 02356167, EFTA 01784162, and EFTA 02393017. But one detail stands out in EFTA 008158111. Epstein asked Chopra about anesthetics and how anesthetics can affect consciousness and what the mechanism might be. Now, Chopra answered with a possible pharmacological mechanism involving microtubules, kind of just offhand. But here's the question. Why is a man with Epstein's history asking about how consciousness can be chemically altered? Now, we can all draw our own conclusions, but again, what is he up to? But here's the thing about this entire mystical fringe track. After all of this investment, Gino Yu, Peter Fenwick, Dean Radin, the brain scanners, the VR rigs, Epstein concluded it didn't work. In EFTA 02579443, he says the following.
I've seen no one with special abilities. Not one. Some savants, but uninteresting. Many claims, but none have withstood the tests.
Nobody was a psychic. Nobody could bend spoons. But here's the thing, folks. He kept paying. Why fund something that produces nothing? But also, what test is he talking about in that quote? What is happening here? What are they actually looking for? Now, here's a question. Was the mystical fringe track never supposed to be the main investment? What if it was the screening program? Let's talk about the computational track. Let's talk about where some of the real money was going. Some of the real money was going to Joscha Bach. Now, you've heard this guy's name mentioned in the basics. He's an MIT AI researcher. He knows a lot about consciousness. In fact, he probably has one of the best theories on consciousness that I've ever come across. I used to listen to this guy on tons of podcasts, and I didn't even know he was a part of all of this shit. And now it comes out. It's just crazy. The things that come out and the people involved, it's wild. I'm going to digress, but why is he working with this guy? He should know better. But they don't. I don't understand. But in any case, what I didn't explain is why Joscha Bach matters to this theory more than almost anyone else. It's his framework, which he describes using what he called mobjects, which are mathematical objects modeling consciousness as computation, and he proposes something very specific. Basically, the brain is a biological machine, and consciousness is simply the software running on it. And this isn't meant as a metaphor, it's a literal claim. If his model and theory is correct, well then consciousness, like any other software, could theoretically be duplicated and run on many different systems, whether it's a cloned brain, a synthetic one, or a digital one. That single idea or theory is what makes the entire conspiracy transfer pipeline theory a possibility. Without this idea, without this theory, you're just freezing dead tissue and building robots. But with it, you have a theoretical basis for moving a mind. And the broader network around Epstein wasn't just tolerating this idea, they were building on it. Ben Goertzel, the guy I mentioned in the basics, he's an AI researcher. You heard about him in stage 5, transferring the mind. He didn't just recommend Randall Cooney, this mind uploading guy, to Epstein. He was in cahoots with Epstein for a long time. Listen to this. Here's Goertzel writing to Epstein in EFTA 02431874.
Now, if you want to have 100,000 more birthdays, you should fund my AI project so we can create a thinking machine that will solve the problem of mortality.
In his 2010 book, A Cosmist Manifesto, Ben Goertzel laid out a vision where minds are uploaded to computers to achieve immortality, where virtual realities are built for digital beings to inhabit, and where the promises of religions, including resurrecting the dead, actually become real through technology. Epstein appears to have donated to Goertzel's organization. It's called Humanity Plus. He gave $30,000 in 2013, $300,000 in 2014, and $150,000 in 2016 based on EFTA 019-10894, EFTA 01196412, and EFTA 00630075. Now, after one of these donations, Goertzel wrote back the following.
Many, many thanks. You won't regret it. The AI we build will thank you one day.
Now, here's another thing. While I'm ranting, I used to read Ben Goertzel's blog regularly. It's called The Multiverse According to Ben. And it's just unbelievable to me that this entire time, behind the scenes, they know he's a convicted sex offender. Yet they're emailing him back and forth. They're conversing with him. They're meeting with him. I don't understand what's going on. And when you see how many people are affected by this, George Church, Ben Goertzel, Joscha, Bach, all these public intellectuals who are doing really wicked, crazy things, at the end of the day, they were all being puppeted in some way, being influenced in some way, making ridiculous, stupid decisions. When you come across this, especially if you've been following these guys for a long time, it's hard to understand what is going on here. How is this possible? There are a ton of people who just on principle wouldn't interact with Epstein. They just, no, thank you. No. Why are they not doing this? Is this the only way they can get funding? Of course not. If you have good things you're working on, there's plenty of ways to get funding. Why is it this in particular? It's so confusing to me. I don't know, but I will digress. Let's talk about Randall Cooney. Now, if Joscha Bach is providing the theory and Ben Goertzel is providing the vision and the artificial intelligence, Cooney is the one trying to build the thing. Now, I want to make a note here. As far as I know, Randall Cooney, he was just recommended to Epstein by Ben Goertzel. I don't have any evidence that Randall himself was ever in contact with Epstein, as far as I could find. But his work fits the theme of what I'm going on here. So I want to mention this because I think it's important. But also note, he's not in the same category as the other people. I don't think he was emailing Epstein as far as I can tell. I didn't find things in the files to indicate that. But anyways, his organization is called Carbon Copies Foundation, and it defines its goal in plain technical language. Scan a human brain, model its complete functional organization, and reproduce it on a computational substrate, allowing for the recreation of cognition, memory, and potentially consciousness itself. And they're not just theorizing, they're running active competitions to solve what they call the translation problem, converting raw brain scan data into working emulation. They're trying to build substrate-independent minds. Very sci-fi, but here we are in 2026. This is what is going on. And wait till we get till section 3. Some of this is not even science fiction anymore. But here's another thing. The network wasn't just confined to fringe researchers. According to EFTA 01880316, the person who recommended Sebastian Sung's book, The Connectome, to Epstein, the book arguing that your identity is written into your brain's wiring, and we call it the connectome. Guess who recommended that? Jean-Luc Brunel. Now, Jean-Luc Brunel, some of you are familiar with that name. This was the trafficking associate that was later found dead in his Paris jail cell. Very suspicious, very weird. He also ran a model recruiting agency that was funded by guess who? Epstein. We have a figure implicated in trafficking, pointing a convicted sex offender toward the science of how identity is physically encoded in neural connections. Like, it's just a crazy network of things that are going on. So Epstein was simultaneously financing two models of what consciousness could be. One said it could be detected and scored, as well as expanded beyond conventional beliefs, such as telepathy, things like this. But others said it was code that can be copied. Now, both of these tracks have different foundations, but what's interesting is they both draw on the same conclusion. Consciousness is separate from the human body, or can be separated from the human body. Two different tracks, same conclusion. That's the ideology that makes this pipeline conspiracy theory make sense. If you can extract consciousness from the biological body, can you cheat death? Was this a goal that Epstein was pursuing? Was he successful? But here's what I haven't told you yet, and this is where the episode is going to take a turn. The consciousness experiments and the exploitation of women maybe weren't running on separate tracks either. Based on the documents, they appear to have been operating under the same roof. If you want more disturbing Epstein content after listening to today's show, I just did a deep dive on the horrifying allegations of Epstein's breeding program at Zorro Ranch in the latest bonus episode on Patreon. Here is the trailer.
A Swerve podcast, Patreon exclusive production. Underground rooms fitted with cameras and a place staff called the fertility room.
Superior gene pool? Why me? Why my hair color and eye color?
A Harvard lab stored his DNA. A biohacker pitched him a cloning company.
This gets us to the first live birth of a human designer baby, and possibly a human clone.
I have no issue with investing. The problem is, only if I am seen to lead.
The FBI never searched the ranch.
I only got 10 to 15 minutes to hold her before they took her.
The Epstein breeding program conspiracy theory. Join the file room on Patreon today.
If you're missing perfect flavor in your life, you don't have to wait for your consciousness to be uploaded and perfectly stimulated. I recommend that you check out Flavors of the Forest, Bigfoot Breath, Garlic Dust using the link in the description. The show gets a small kickback and you get some dank premium freeze-dried garlic dust. You can use promo code SWERVE for 15% off at checkout. Check out Flavors of the Forest, Bigfoot Breath, Garlic Dust. The link's in the description. The standard Epstein story has two halves, the trafficking and the science. Nobody puts them in the same frame because they seem like different kinds of evil. But the brain scanning equipment was in the same building where minors were being trafficked. The consciousness researcher who rated women on a 5-stage consciousness scale was copied on emails about testing women's belief thresholds. The question isn't whether these two programs were connected. The question is whether Epstein ever thought they were separate. The documents don't just show Epstein funding consciousness research from a distance. They show him personally running experiments on belief itself. EFTA 02402848 is an email thread from August 2016 between Epstein and a man named David Savage or Savage. I don't know which it is. I'm going to go with Savage because it sounds it sounds a little bit more interesting. David Savage. In any case, David Savage is someone who claims he can read people through touch and empathy, and he's not a scientist by his own admission. He's someone who has like an ability, and he claims that he can do things. So Dr. Gino Yu, the guy with the 5 stages of consciousness scale, he's CC'd on this email thread, and this ties it directly back to that consciousness research network we were discussing earlier. Now, Savage had recently met Epstein, and they were brainstorming ways to test whether Savage's claimed abilities were real. Now, in the middle of coaching Savage on experimental design, Epstein casually revealed something that he's already done. This is what he writes.
I did this with 200 girls. Each one had to rate the accuracy of diagnosis on a scale of 1 to 10. The results ranged from 3 to 10. However, the written diagnosis was exactly the same for each. No one liked the result. Believing is more fun.
Then he adds,
I told them that the astrologer in the room could tell them their diagnosis. They all received the exact same piece of paper. However, they all rated the astrologer as between good and perfect.
That's 200 women. Every single one was given an identical fake reading printed on the same piece of paper, and they all rated their outcome as being accurate. Epstein's takeaway is more of a pushback on Savage's abilities. Look how people can be tricked into believing things about themselves, kind of thing. It's not a scientific thing. It's more cynical. What he's saying is people want to believe, and belief is easy to manufacture. Now, this exchange exhibits a pattern of Epstein treating women as experimental material, while also tying in his fascination with unconventional abilities involving consciousness. Now, importantly, Epstein was actively coaching Savage to run more experiments using women as subjects.
I would try 10 women and 10 names. You will need to touch each one.
The main point I'm trying to make here, this casual experiment was connected to the formal research network because Gino Yu was CC'd on this. And the subject pool they were discussing was women. Now, we can't make any definitive statements or draw any major links with this knowledge. We're just planting little data points of dots. But you can see when we add this to what we know about Epstein, well, what is going on here? Now, I want to bring up something really crazy here. I want to talk about genetic memory because the previous correspondence raises a question. Why would consciousness research require female test subjects at all? And the answer may be in EFTA 02642274. This document is a forwarded email thread that involves Deepak Chopra, Ramachandran, and Daryl Treifert to Epstein. Also, Daryl's a weird name. Does anybody know someone named Daryl? It sounds like it should be Harold, but they're like, yeah, let's just put a D there. Let me know if anybody actually knows Daryl. If you're a Daryl listening to this, let me know. Is that a real name? It's kind of weird. Maybe it's just me. But in any case, here a question is proposed in the document. Quote, how do savants know things they never learned? My explanation is genetic memory, end quote. So the idea here is that knowledge, possibly consciousness itself, isn't just in the brain. Maybe it's also in the DNA. Not taught, not learned, but inherited. Now, the email chain also references a Japanese musician who, after having had a head injury, acquired a completely new skill. And the question is, where did that skill come from? If the ideas about genetic memory are correct, it would mean consciousness isn't confined to neural wiring, it's embedded in DNA itself. And anything embedded in DNA can be selected for, edited, or bred. Now, I covered this conspiracy theory about Epstein's breeding program in the most recent episode on Patreon in depth. Now, we're not going to go into depth here about this, but what we discussed is Epstein's strange involvement with genetic cloning, eugenics, creating designer babies, and having his own skin cells harvested and converted into stem cells and then stored at Harvard. But with this in mind, the question now becomes, is it possible the cloning apparatus that Epstein was also involved in, which I'm not covering in this episode, we're covering the consciousness apparatus, but was the cloning apparatus and the consciousness apparatus a single thing? Were they two arms of the same program? If you can breed for genetic traits, and consciousness is a genetic trait in this model, then selecting and breeding women isn't separate from the consciousness pipeline. It is the consciousness pipeline. Now, of course, all of this is speculation, right? We don't know anything about any of this. Even the concept of genetic memory, that's just hyper speculative. I want to be clear on that. I'm not saying that the mind is encoded in DNA. It's just an idea, right? It's a speculation. And this whole thing is, we can all agree on that. There's so many different things coming on. But again, we're just going through the conspiracy theory. We're pointing out the little points and we're trying to attach that to the narrative that is the consciousness transfer pipeline. So let's continue. In the same email chain, the same EFTA 02642274, the idea of acquired savants is discussed. Now, acquired savants are people who suffer severe brain injuries and wake up with abilities they never had before. I casually just mentioned that Japanese musician they were talking about, but this is, in general, what an acquired savant is. Now, for example, it could be something like acquiring perfect musical pitch after a head trauma. Maybe you have a stroke and now you have really strong memory, almost photographic. Abilities that appear to have been latent in the brain, but somehow they're unlocked by the damage. And we don't really understand what that is or how that could be. But here's the thing. Think about what that means along everything else we've been discussing. And it could be very dark. Now, again, I want to be clear, this is speculative interpretation. It's not proven fact from the documents. But let's think about this. What if the women involved with Epstein were also a part of an experiment? What if the abuse was a deliberate variable of the experiment being tested in order to unlock something? What do you think about that? I don't know. I'm just speculating. But here's some more haunting speculation. Some of the women in Epstein's orbit may have understood what was happening, possibly before anyone analyzing the documents did. According to EFTA 02721399, a woman wrote to Epstein the following.
You described me as a failed experiment. I didn't know that I was a part of one. Am I an unsuspecting Galatia or a pawn in your dealings with Leon?
Now, in that quote, Leon is presumably Leon Black, the American private equity investor. He has so many ties to Epstein, we don't even need to get into that here, but that's what that means. But more importantly, that quote, there's two accusations in one sentence. First, you experimented on me without my knowledge. Second, she alludes to the myth of Galatea. In the myth of Galatea, Pygmalion sculpts the perfect woman, and the gods bring her to life. But Galatea isn't Pygmalion. She's a completely new creation, something built to someone else's specifications. This woman was asking Epstein, did you try to shape me into something? Was I raw material for a project I didn't consent to? And the word she chose, experiment, is the same word that runs through every layer of the consciousness research. And here's the thing, she probably wasn't the only one. According to EFTA 018626162, another email about a different woman reads the following. Now, this is a pretty crazy one, but here you go. Listen to this.
She is alone this last week in New York and has lost dollars on this trip. She is desperate for cash. I have been working on her. She agreed with me that posing in lingerie is part of her job, and she told me she would have no problem to do that with you. But she doesn't have the courage to propose it herself. I know it doesn't seem like much, but it's a step. She plans on coming back to New York, so I'm thinking she could be an ongoing project. For me, it's a great experiment, taking a girl who hadn't been a guy until she was 23, and then getting her to this point.
The email continues.
She is sufficiently confused, and I think you can get some mileage out of this.
So they're referring to her as an ongoing project, sufficiently confused, get some mileage, a great experiment. Now, whether that's coincidence or confession depends on how you interpret the documents, but we can agree that something manipulative is occurring here. Could it have been tied to some of this research that was going on? That's where we're making a speculative leap, but it is interesting to note. Now, here's another thing. All of this may have been happening in the same physical space that trafficking was occurring. Now, we've mentioned this a little bit, but let's talk about it for a second. Recall that Dr. Gino Yu wanted to install an EEG rig and VR system in Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. We have the documents that he was discussing this. Well, that's the same property that is central to the trafficking allegations. Now, around this time, we have evidence that trafficking was occurring. According to EFTA 020456162, Epstein received an email from his lawyer's office saying the following.
Spoke to, redacted. There are 4 girls in total, and they are all 17 years old.
Now, the brain scanning equipment, the VR apparatus, the consciousness experiments, well, what if they were all running in the same building where minors were being trafficked? Post-conviction, post-plea deal. The documents don't tell us whether Epstein saw them as separate activities. What they do establish is that no physical wall may have existed between them. Pretty interesting, hey? So overall, what's been said so far with this conspiracy theory, Epstein may have been funding a pipeline to transfer consciousness. The ideology behind it rested on the belief that consciousness is separable from the body, either from a mystical perspective or a computational perspective. And the women in his network may not have been separate from that research. Now, is any of this provable? Well, no. We're speculating. We're attempting to swerve in between the lines and these little data points and make a case. The documents don't prove that women were a part of formal consciousness research protocols. And in fact, we're not even sure if there was formal consciousness research protocols. But they show something almost as disturbing. A man who saw no boundary between experimenting on ideas and experimenting on people. But here's a question that should genuinely unsettle you. Could any of this actually work? And here's the thing, folks. The answer is much more complicated than just giving a simple no. And some of it, as of only about 1 week ago, as I'm recording this, is already working. The easy response to everything I've told you so far is, none of this is real. It's a billionaire's delusion. And 10 years ago, you'd have been right. But something happened between then and now. The science didn't stay still. And the part that should unsettle you isn't that Epstein was funding this research. It's that the research started working after he was gone. Please follow or subscribe to the show. This helps the project much more than you know. Before we get into the science, let me remind you of the 5 stages of this consciousness transfer pipeline that we laid out in the basics, because what I'm about to show you will map directly onto it. Stage 1, map consciousness. Understand what it is. Stage 2, model the brain. Describe it digitally. Stage 3, preserve it. Keep it intact after death. Stage 4, build a new body. create a vessel. Stage 5, transfer. Move the mind into it. When Epstein was funding this research, every single one of those stages was theoretical. Not one of them had been demonstrated in the lab as far as any of us know. That's what made it easy to dismiss as a billionaire's fantasy, as conspiracy theory. Well, this is becoming more believable as mainstream technology has improved. Let me show you what's happened since. Let's focus on stage 1. We have the brain-computer interface. This is a rapidly evolving area. Elon Musk told shareholders that mind uploading could be less than 20 years away. Someone in Epstein's circle wrote that they were, quote, very intrigued by Neuralink, end quote. The Epstein Files reveal extensive correspondence between Elon Musk and Epstein and Peter Thiel reportedly exchanged more than 2,000 messages. Neuralink, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with at this point, has received approval for human trials and has successfully implanted their brain-computer interface in patients. And this includes first procedures that were held outside the US in Canada in 2025. The concept of a device that reads neural signals, literally a mind-reading device, this is no longer speculative. There are devices that will do exactly that, and they are being surgically installed. And not only are they being installed, they work. This type of technology is an early approximation of stage 1 of this consciousness transfer pipeline conspiracy theory, mapping consciousness. If you can understand neural signals at a deep level, maybe you can understand awareness itself. Let's talk about stage 2. This is one of the most crazy things that I've come across. I opened the episode with it. That's how wild this was. In March 2026, Eon Systems announced what they believe is the first time a complete brain emulation, every neuron, every synapse, has been embodied in a simulated body and produced multiple distinct behaviors on its own. Now, this brain emulation, it happens to be a fly. This isn't a human. It's a very, very small brain, but the proof of principle has now been established. The team used the FlyWire Connectome. This is a Princeton-led collaboration that completed the first full neural wiring diagram of a fly brain, which they published in Nature, which is a scientific journal, in 2024. Now, recall this term connectome. That's the same kind of connectome that the researcher Sebastian Sung was pursuing when he visited Epstein's island. In fact, Sebastian, he's a member of the FlyWire team. He's a very prominent figure. If you were to look up any of these things, in fact, the citations I have in today's show notes, you'll come across his name in many articles discussing this technology. Now, the fly's connectome, this shot, this digital reconstruction of every synapse in the fly's brain, it was paired with a virtual simulated body that was built by neuroengineers in Switzerland. When this occurred, there was a closed loop. Sensory signals entered the emulated brain from the simulated environment. Activity would propagate through the copied wiring. Motor commands came out the other side, and this virtual simulated fly body executed them. I have a video for this. It's going to be linked in the description. But what you can see is this virtual fly extend its legs. It starts grooming itself as virtual particles of dust collected on itself. It knew to groom itself. It feeds from a bowl. It starts eating a lemon or a banana slice or something. It could navigate towards the food. It could sense this all in this simulated environment. And the simulated brain produced behaviors you would expect that would be typical of a fly. We're living in a completely different world. This is insane. This is very wild. Alex Weissner-Gross is the co-founder of Eon Systems, and he's a physicist known for work in computational intelligence whose company was specific about what this is. Here's what they said.
What you are seeing is not an animation. It is not a reinforcement learning policy mimicking biology. It is a copy of a biological brain, wired neuron to neuron from electron microscopy data, running in simulation, making a body move.
The company's next target is a mouse brain, and then what they call human-scale emulation. Here's how Alex Weissner-Gross puts it.
If a fly brain can now close the sensory motor loop in simulation, the question for the mouse becomes one of scale, not of kind.
I want to show you guys another quote right from Eon Systems' webpage that will blow your minds.
We're entering an era of artificial superintelligence. The biggest question isn't whether ASI will arrive, it's what form it takes and who gets to participate in it. Right now, the default path is a few labs build opaque AI systems, and the rest of humanity hopes they're aligned. I think there's a better option. A successful hi-fi upload should feel like you that is robust, free from illness and death, editable, can run faster than real time and keep up with AI. Transistors are 1 billion times faster than neurons, and most importantly aligned with your values, memories, relationships, and moral intuitions.
So, stage 2, uploading the mind, and arguably stage 5, transferring the mind, because there's a virtual body they're transferring it into. These pieces of the consciousness transfer pipeline conspiracy theory, they're actually more real than you think. If it can be done with a fly's connectome today, it's just a matter of time for a human connectome. It's just a matter of scale, is it not? What does that mean? So many things. But let's move on to stage 3, brain preservation. Connectome is a company that is developing chemical brain preservation. I mentioned them earlier, but the idea is to fix every neural connection in place permanently using a chemical solution so that someday the complete wiring diagram can be scanned and extracted. Again, making a connectome of the human brain, but using dead, fixed tissue. At the time Epstein was digging into this, a lot of this is speculative. The chemistry is unproven on anything close to a full human brain. But here's the thing, Connectome is still active. They're still pursuing this research, and they've published peer-reviewed work on what they call vitrifixation, a process that preserves an entire mammalian connectome intact. They've demonstrated it works in animal brains, the connections survive, the structures hold. But here's the twist on all of this. Preservation might not even require keeping the physical brain anymore. Think about what the FlyWire connectome actually is. There's a team of hundreds of scientists who spent a decade mapping every single neuron and every single connection in a fruit fly's brain from electron microscopy images. When they finished, they had the complete wiring diagram stored as data. They didn't need the physical brain. The physical brain tissue those images came from is irrelevant now. The map is the preservation, and the digital records is what Eon Systems used to make a virtual fly move. When Epstein was funding this pipeline, preservation meant cryonics, freezing your head and hoping someone could scan it later. Connectome offered a chemical upgrade to the same idea. But the connectome represents something more radical. You don't need to preserve the physical brain at all if you can map it completely before or after death. The blueprint becomes the brain. The path to stage 3 of the conspiracy pipeline is also more realistic than you might think. Let's talk about stage 4. Here I want to talk about lab-grown brains. Well, brain organoids at this point, not full brains. And I want to talk about artificial wombs. In 2025, a Johns Hopkins team published findings in Nature Communications Biology showing that human brain organoids had developed the fundamental building blocks of learning and memory. Brain organoids are tiny neuron clusters grown from stem cells. They're smaller than a pen dot at this point, but they demonstrated synaptic plasticity and activated genes that normally switch on during memory formation. These biological neural networks organized into a functional state that the researchers described as balanced between chaos and order. This is a signature of how developed brains process information. Lena Smirnova, an assistant professor at Johns Hopkins, said the research in the long run, quote,
lays the foundation for organoid intelligence, biological computing systems that might one day complement traditional AI and even open new paths for brain-machine interfaces.
We should note this is an early approximation of stage 4 of this consciousness transfer pipeline conspiracy theory, building the body. But the thing is, if you can grow brain structures that learn, maybe remember, and might have experiences, well, you're growing a substrate that consciousness could theoretically also inhabit. Now, furthermore, in August 2025, scientists in Barcelona recorded something never seen before, a human embryo implanting in a womb in real time. Except it wasn't a real womb. It was a collagen gel matrix built in a lab. An artificial tissue, we could say. The embryo actively burrowed into the artificial tissue. This is also an early approximation of stage 4 of this pipeline. If you can build a functional artificial womb, well, you're going to be able to produce bodies. And I use the word produce here not lightly. I don't know of a better word to use. It's just dark. If you have an artificial womb, that's true. you, in theory, could produce bodies. The question is, what are they used for? What's the application here? Does it get dark? It might. And it's disturbing, but this is true. And of course, for stage 5, uploading the mind, that ties into the connectome. We've already discussed that. That seems to be possible. You can emulate a mind, although it's only a fly mind as far as we know right now. So let's take stock of where we are. Every stage of the proposed pipeline conspiracy that Epstein was funding for consciousness transfer, every one of them now has a real functioning proof of concept that didn't exist when he was writing the checks. The pipeline Epstein was funding privately is now being assembled publicly. Maybe it's not being called consciousness transfer. Maybe it is being called brain-computer interfaces, digital twins, organoid intelligence, whole brain emulation. Perhaps the vocabulary has changed, but the trajectory did not. And the thing is, none of these technologies work at human scale. Not yet, and at least not officially. There could be things happening behind closed doors that say something else. We don't know. But regardless, the direction is no longer in question. Every stage that sounded like science fiction in 2016 has moved into the domain of published peer-reviewed science by 2026, which brings us back to the central question of this episode. Did Jeffrey Epstein believe he had engineered a way to cheat death? Well, the documents suggest he did, or at the very least, he was placing very expensive bets in that direction. And the science he was funding, well, it's not fiction anymore. Join me in today's final thoughts. Oh, all right, folks, we've made it to the deep end. Here we go. I'm going to tie this up. I'm going to tell you what I actually think about this. I think there's some interesting ideas here. We could go on forever about this. Have we proved anything? Like many of these conspiracy theories we discuss, no, we don't have the proof. Again, we have little data points that we're putting out. Hey, this is from this document. Look what this email said. Look what was funded here. Little things we know. And we're trying to overlay something that can make sense of everything. It's a theory. It's a thesis. But here's the thing. As we just went through, it is a little disturbing. It's a little closer to reality than I expected when I went into researching this topic. The technology has honestly surprised me. I'm very surprised by this virtual brain and things. But I want to talk about a couple things here. This is one thing that I actually think. I think we're encountering a paradox. It's called the teletransportation paradox. This is a philosophical problem at the heart of consciousness transfer. And in a way, it kind of throws a wrench in the entire concept of this consciousness transfer pipeline. And this was put forward by a guy named Derek Parfit. He laid it out in 1984 in his writing Reasons and Persons. Basically, this is the argument. A machine scans your body, it destroys it, and builds a perfect copy somewhere, let's say Mars. So you got a perfect copy on Mars. That copy has your memories, your personality, and continuity. It really will wake up believing it's you. But you, the original, you experienced being destroyed. You didn't travel. You were killed. The copy is a new person who carries your entire psychological profile. So if we apply this idea to Epstein's pipeline, clone a body, map a brain, upload the pattern, what emerges would believe it's Jeffrey Epstein. Let's say all of this was true. In the back rooms of these labs, the technology is more advanced than we expected. And Jeffrey Epstein really did transfer his mind into another body. Let's just entertain it for a second. Let's say that happened. What emerged would believe it's Jeffrey Epstein. It would have his memories, his personality, his neural architecture. But the original is truly gone. The copy problem can't be engineered around. A copy of you is not you. It's a new person completely convinced that it is you, but it's not you. Does that make sense? So that's one thing with this whole piece of technology. Everybody's seeking immortality, but they won't get it. They won't get it, at least not in my opinion. I think this is true. And here's another abstract idea that kind of is in the same lane of thought here. It's just an idea on the concept of an exact copy. Let's say you can produce an exact copy. Let's say you can do that. The exact copy of anything, whether it's a human being, whether it's an atom, whether it's a cup. You can just snap your fingers, produce the exact same copy. Is it really an exact copy? Well, actually, no, it's not, even from a different philosophical angle. So let's use an example of an atom, like an element. Elements are supposed to be fungible. They're all the same. But are they actually all the same? Let's say you could copy an atom. The copy would not be the same even if it was exactly the same physical atom. What do I mean? Well, everything operates in physical space. As far as we understand, we're in 3 dimensions. This is physical space around us. So everything has the is that it is, but not the coordinates of that is. And could I be any more abstract and confusing here? What the hell am I saying? Let's put it more concrete. A copy of A is not really A. It's actually A prime. It's a different A. It's similar to A, but it's not A. It's A prime. Because the copy of A, which we're going to label as A prime, is in a completely different coordinate space. They don't occupy the same space. Why am I being so abstract about this? I'm just trying to drive the point home that even the concept of an exact copy, I don't even think that exists. Because even if you had magic, snapped your fingers, and produced the exact same copy of an element, which are exactly the same, they're not. They have different coordinate spaces. They don't exist in the exact coordinate. So all of this is to say, I don't think a copy is even possible. And I don't think, even if you did do that, I don't think it would be you. This immortality game that transhumanism is seeking, I'm not certain it exists. I'm not certain it exists. I think it could be a fool's errand. What do you think about that? Maybe I'm wrong, but here's something. If Epstein did achieve this, or his brain is preserved somewhere at Harvard awaiting to be transferred into a human connectome and be solved and then have it applied to some kind of biological or humanoid robot vessel, it would not be Epstein. It would be Epstein Prime. Technically, right? It wouldn't, right? A can't be A. A and A prime are not the same. They have different coordinate spaces. Epstein and replicated Epstein would not be the same. It'd be an Epstein prime. So there's something there. I don't know what. We can talk more about simulation stuff. I don't really want to get into that here. I'd like to do an entire episode on simulation stuff. I'd like to do several episodes in the future on simulation stuff because it's so wild. But the fact that essentially the mind of a fly was uploaded into a simulation and functioned as a fly would be expected to function in said simulation, it's disturbing as f*** for me. The credence levels that we are in base reality are much less as these types of technology develop. But here's the thing. I do believe Epstein genuinely believed he was a visionary, even though he was, without question, a horrible monster. But as far as we know, the technology doesn't work, at least not yet. And even if it does in some near future or secret compartmentalized black project with DARPA, it won't achieve what he wanted. You can't copy yourself into immortality. You can only produce a copy that believes it's you. And yet the component technologies are being assembled right now by the most powerful organizations on Earth. Brain-computer interfaces, digital consciousness simulation, lab-grown brain tissue that learns, artificial wombs, gene editing, complete brain emulations driving virtual bodies. Nobody calls it consciousness transfer, but every one of these is a piece of this pipeline from this conspiracy theory. Maybe the question was never whether Epstein succeeded in producing a consciousness transferring pipeline. Maybe it's more about why so many of the world's most powerful people were in his orbit, and why the conversations kept coming back to the brain. About a week ago, as of recording and researching this, the co-founder of Eon Systems watched a simulated fruit fly take its first steps and wrote the following, quote, "The ghost is no longer in the machine. The machine is becoming the ghost," end quote. So whether Epstein's pipeline was real or not, that sentence is not science fiction. There is a network of influential minds pursuing similar goals and making progress in areas he was funding and displayed an interest in. In a way, the people building this technology inherited the same dream. My only hope is that they didn't inherit the same heart. Well, folks, the Epstein Files are even crazier than I could have ever imagined. Oh man, the last 2 episodes I've done have been Epstein stuff. So all I'm seeing is EFTAs and weird emails in my mind with like redacted things. It's what I'm dreaming of. It's crazy. If you like the podcast, you should follow the show. If you really like the podcast, there's a link to Patreon in the show notes. Reminder to submit your topic recommendations at theswervepodcast.com. And I also want to mention that the outro music for every episode is available for free at patreon.com/theswervepodcast. Quick reminder, if you want more of the show, Patreon is where it lives. The File Room gets you 1 bonus episode a month. The Producer Vault gets you 2. Both tiers also have their own archives full of episodes you've never heard word. You get early access on Sundays, no ads. You get a private feed that drops right into your podcast app. There's nothing to remember. There's nothing to check. It just shows up like magic. I just did a deep dive on the Epstein breeding program conspiracy in the file room on Patreon. So if you liked this episode, that one is going to be perfect for you too. Links in the description. On that note, I have a number of you to shout out for supporting the project on Patreon. Shout out to Don't Care, Omar, Deanne Schneider, Christopher, Flavors of the Forest Garlic, Jeffrey Bronson, Rick, and Don Screef for joining the file room on Patreon. An epic dank shout outs to ... It's literally just 2 periods. I don't know how to shout that out. Yesterday's Jelly, Rachel Yangle, Mika Sasita, Kristen W, Beck Roberts, Krisha X Calamity, Haley Skaya, Daniel Wolf, Sunny Biscuits, Cecilia Sample, Moon Puppy, Larks K, Caitlin Crowley, Ryan P, Trouser Mouse, Jar Jar 13131, Amy Digital Pilot, Fat Monkey Balls, Renee Schlinsog, and AKS 181. Thank you all for supporting this show. It means more to me than you know. One other thing, reminder to check out that Flavors of the Forest link in the description and get yourself some Bigfoot garlic dust today. The show does receive a small kickback from purchases through that link, so it's an easy way to support the project and get something wicked awesome for yourself. Thanks to you all for listening today. I will see you in the next one. May good karma and vibes be with you all.
Stays clean. Who cares what the body is seen? He didn't die, he just locked out, slid through the wires into a new shell now. Upload the ghost, they erase the skin. He didn't die, he just signed in again. Cold glass, your face in a file. Dead eyes, learning to smile. Rental flesh on a privateer. Pay to respawn, far from here. Whose hands are holding your string? Whose code decides what you think? He didn't die, he just logged out, slid through the wires into a new shell now. Upload the ghost, erase the skin. He didn't die, he just signed in again.
I would like to give massive props and credits to the producer tier on Patreon. Shout out to Satan Loves You, Dana, David Cheesem, Jorge de Guzman, Shelly Terry, the Mossman, Batcat Meatloaf, Riley, Velcro Shoe Guy, Miss T-Dub, Tosh Collins and the Future Anglers of Indian Lake, Ohio, Brock Huseman, Corpse Candles, Sean D, Michael Gould, Raekwon, Forever Driven, Mika Cecita, Michael P, Ol McWillis, Johnny Knight, Host of Rivera, That Girl from Quebec, Voxscan for Life, Dave Natel, Shay, Aaliyah, Mark Rowland, Nick Cantonay, Joshua Sindo, Danny Brown, Yesterday's Jelly, Danny Harlan, Gandalf the Griver, Finton Walsh, Sweet_Chaos, Sharanomicon, Jesse Gibson, Adam Palafox, Ryan Moeller, Jesse South, Jasmine Shook, JR Nunez, Gandrew, Sunny Biscuits, Kaiser Souza, Linda Beasley, Thomas Simone, Kristen Castle, Chevy, Jason Moore, Sarah, Lady Hobbit, Kenny Larks, Baldwiner, Colt Farr, Katazina Zacida, Papa Apple, Dono Yankee, Laurel, Juan Rodriguez, Sam, Benjamin Clark, Tank Odom, Chip, Susanna, Renee Schlinsog, Fat Monkey Balls, Amy, Jar Jar 13131, Trouser_Mouse, Ryan P, K, Moon Puppy, Cecilia Sample, Daniel Wolf, Haley's Comet, Krisha X Calamity, Beck Roberts, Kristen W, Rachel Yangle, and ... for enabling today's episode and the continued growth of the show. Also, epic thank you to Chevy for becoming an amplifier of the show on Patreon, and David Cheesem for making his own damn tier.